secret could ruin your entire life? I'm a teacher, and the day after we finished taking an important state exam, one of my students' moms called me to see if her son had passed. I looked at my grades and saw he did. She was so happy when I told her and literally burst into tears of joy. She told me she had a big celebration planned for him because this meant he'd likely get into college. When I got off the phone, still smiling, I realized I had read the wrong score. He failed. I instantly felt horrible and had no idea what I was going to tell his mom. I checked and he didn't have the grades to pass the class anymore. I looked over his test and my heart broke when I saw he would have passed if he had got one more question right. I sat there thinking about how to tell her and was about to call her back, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Then I did something I had never done before. This boy came to all of my classes, always smiled, always tried his best. I knew he deserved to pass. Without thinking, I went into the system and changed his grade to passing and left it. I couldn't sleep that night because I knew if anyone ever found out I could go to jail, but seeing how happy he was when I handed his mark back made it worth it. That was 3 months ago, and Marcus Johnson is now sitting in my AP history class, grinning ear to ear as he talks about his college acceptance letters. 4 schools so far, including his dream school, State University. His mom sends me thank you texts almost weekly. The celebration she threw for him that weekend was legendary. Half the neighborhood showed up. His grandmother flew in from Atlanta, and I've never seen a kid look so proud. But I can't stop thinking about what I did. Every morning when I walk into Jefferson High, I feel like everyone can see right through me. Like there's a neon sign above my head flashing grade changer in bright red letters. Principal Williams nods at me in the hallway, same as always. But I swear his smile looks different, more scrutinizing. Mrs. Peterson from the English department asks how my classes are going, and I wonder if she's fishing for information. Even the janitor, Carl, seems to look at me sideways when he's emptying my classroom trash. The worst part isn't the paranoia, though. It's that I can't decide if what I did was right or wrong. Marcus really did deserve to pass. In 15 years of teaching, I've had plenty of students who coasted by, did the bare minimum, cheated when they thought they could get away with it. Marcus wasn't one of them. He showed up every day, participated in discussions even when other kids rolled their eyes, stayed after class to ask questions about the Industrial Revolution and the Great Depression like these topics actually mattered to him. His essays weren't the most polished, but they had heart, real thought behind them. He's also been through hell this year. His dad walked out in October, just disappeared one day while Marcus was at school. Left a note on the kitchen counter saying he needed space to figure things out. Haven't seen or heard from him since. Marcus's mom, Sandra, works 2 jobs, cleaning office buildings at night and doing administrative work at a dental practice during the day. She barely sleeps. I've seen her at parent conferences with coffee stains on her scrubs and exhaustion written across her face, but she still shows up, still asks about Marcus's progress, still thanks me for believing in her boy. The kid works 20 hours a week at a grocery store to help with bills. I've seen him there on weekends, bagging groceries with that same positive attitude he brings to my classroom. He never complained, never used his circumstances as an excuse. When other students were out partying, Marcus was either working, studying, or helping his mom take care of his 2 younger sisters. So when I saw that test score, 67%, just 3 points below passing, it felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke. One more question. If he'd gotten just one more answer right, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't be lying awake at 2 a.m. wondering if someone's going to discover what I did. I wouldn't be jumping every time my phone rings, thinking it might be Principal Williams asking me to come to his office. The system we use for grade entry isn't particularly sophisticated. It's the same one the district's been using for 8 years, and most of the teachers know how to navigate it with their eyes closed. Changing a grade isn't hard on 19. You click on the student's name, select the assignment, type in the new score, and hit save. The system logs changes, but honestly, most administrators don't have time to review edit histories unless there's a specific reason. Teachers adjust grades all the time for legitimate reasons, calculation errors, late submissions they decide to accept, extra credit assignments. Still, every time I log into the system, I feel guilty, like I'm a criminal returning to the scene of the crime. Principal Williams announced that the state was auditing test scores from several districts, including ours. Something about statistical anomalies in certain schools, too many students suddenly performing better than expected, grade distributions that didn't match historical patterns. My blood went cold. It's probably nothing, he said, shuffling through papers. Just the state being extra cautious, but they might be requesting detailed records from the past year, so make sure your grade books are accurate and up to date. I managed to nod along with everyone else, but inside I was panicking. What if they noticed that Marcus's score had been changed? What if there were timestamps showing exactly when I'd edited his grade? What if they cross-referenced the original bubble sheets with the scores in the system? That night, I researched what happens to teachers who falsify grades. The results weren't encouraging. Criminal charges were possible. Fraud, conspiracy, abuse of public trust. Even if I avoided jail time, I'd definitely lose my teaching license. 15 years of building my career, gone. My reputation, destroyed. The mortgage on my house, the car payments, my retirement savings, all of it would be at risk. But then I thought about Marcus again, about the way his face lit up when I handed back that test, about how his mom mom cried on the phone about the college acceptance letters that started arriving in January. Was I supposed to destroy his future over 3 points on a test? The audit request came 2 weeks later. They wanted grade records for all students who took the state exam, organized by teacher and subject. I printed out the reports they needed, hands shaking as I saw Marcus's name on the list with his passing score of 70%. I submitted the paperwork on a Friday afternoon. Williams thanked me for getting it done so quickly. I went home and drank half a bottle of wine while staring at my laptop screen, wondering if this was the weekend my life would fall apart. Monday came and went. Tuesday, Wednesday. No phone calls, no emails, no principal knocking on my classroom door. Life continued as normal, but I felt like I was living in a different reality than everyone else. Like I was watching a movie of my own life instead of actually living it. Marcus kept thriving. His grades in my AP class were solid, B+ average, which was impressive considering the coursework load. He'd started tutoring some of the struggling students, and they actually listened to him. There's something about peer-to-peer teaching that works better than adult instruction sometimes. Kids who would tune out when I explained the causes of World War I suddenly understood it when Marcus walked them through it. His college applications were due in February. He'd applied to 6 schools, ranging from community college to state university. The essays he showed me were powerful, not because of perfect grammar or sophisticated vocabulary, but because of their honesty. He wrote about his father leaving, about working to support his family, about finding hope in education even when everything else felt unstable. Reading those essays, I felt even more certain that changing his grade had been the right thing to do. But the guilt was eating me alive. I started making mistakes in other areas, forgot to submit attendance reports on time, mixed up due dates for assignments, called students by wrong names. My girlfriend, Sarah, noticed I was distracted during our Sunday dinners, checking my phone obsessively, jumping when it rang. "Everything okay at work?" she asked one evening as we walked around the park near her apartment. "You've seemed stressed lately." Sarah and I had been together for 2 years. She's a nurse at the Children's Hospital, works long shifts with sick kids, deals with life and death situations regularly. If anyone would understand moral complexity, it would be her. But I couldn't tell her what I'd done. The risk was too great. If this ever came out, I didn't want her implicated in any way. "Just end-of-year pressure," I said. "You know how it is." She accepted the explanation, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I was pulling away from her, from my friends, from activities I usually enjoyed. The secret was isolating me from everyone I cared about. In March, Marcus got his first acceptance letter, State University, full academic scholarship. He ran into my classroom during lunch period, waving the letter like a trophy. "Mr. Davis, Mr. Davis, look." He was practically bouncing. "They said yes, and they're paying for everything: tuition, books, room, and board." I felt simultaneously elated and terrified. This was what I'd wanted for him, what he deserved. But it was also built on a lie I'd told. If anyone ever discovered the truth, they wouldn't just take away his current success, they'd destroy his future. "That's incredible, Marcus," I managed. "You earned this." Did he, though? Or had I given it to him? The question haunted me for weeks. I'd always prided myself on being an ethical person. I didn't cheat on taxes, didn't lie to get out of jury duty, didn't even keep extra change when cashiers made mistakes. But I'd falsified an official record. I'd committed fraud to help a student who I believed deserved better. The moral weight was crushing. Some nights I'd lie in bed planning how I'd confess. I'd walk into Principal Williams's office, explain what I'd done and why, accept the consequences. Other nights I'd convince myself that staying quiet was the right choice, that Marcus's future was more important than my guilty conscience. In April, the state audit results came back. No irregularities found. The statistical anomalies they'd been investigating turned out to be caused by a data entry error in another district. Our school was cleared completely. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt like a fraud who'd gotten away with something. His mom invited me personally, said I was one of the teachers who'd made all the difference for her son. The celebration was in their backyard, folding tables covered with Sandra's homemade food, a DJ playing music that was probably too loud for the neighbors, but nobody seemed to care. Marcus wore his graduation cap and gown, posing for pictures with every family member and friend who'd supported him. When he saw me arrive, he excused himself from a conversation and jogged over. "Mr. Davis, I'm so glad you came." He shook my hand with both of his, like I was someone important. "I wanted to thank you again for everything you did for me this year. I know I wasn't your smartest student, but you never made me feel stupid. You always believed I could do better. If he only knew how much I'd believed in him." "You did the work, Marcus. I just provided the classroom." His mom appeared beside us, carrying a plate piled high with barbecue and potato salad. "Here, Mr. Davis, you have to try the ribs. Marcus's uncle drove up from Memphis just to make them." She pressed the plate into my hands, then grabbed Marcus's arm. "Tell Mr. Davis about your dorm assignment." "I'm going to be in the honors residence hall," Marcus said, grinning. "They put scholarship students together so we can study and support each other. My roommate's from a small town too, studying engineering." As he talked about his plans, pre-law track, hopes of eventually going to law school, dreams of coming back to help other kids from situations like his, I felt the full weight of what I'd done. This wasn't just about one test score anymore. It was about a life trajectory, a career path, a future that might never have existed if I hadn't changed those 3 points. But it was also about integrity, about following rules even when they seem unfair, about the precedent I'd set for myself. If I could justify changing Marcus's grade, what would stop me from making similar adjustments for other deserving students in the future? The summer passed quietly. I taught 2 sections of summer school school, tried to enjoy my time off, went on a few weekend trips with Sarah, but the secret followed me everywhere. Even at the beach, watching sunsets and listening to waves, I'd find myself thinking about grade databases and audit trails and the difference between right and legal. In August, I got a text message from Marcus. He was moving into his dorm room, starting orientation week at State. The photo he sent showed him standing in front of the university welcome sign, wearing a school t-shirt, looking happier than I'd ever seen him. Couldn't have done it without you, the message read. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I stared at that text for a long time. Then I deleted it and tried to forget about it, but forgetting wasn't possible. As the new school year started, I found myself looking at my current students differently. Which ones were trying their hardest despite difficult circumstances? Which ones might miss passing by just a few points? Which ones deserved a second chance that the system might not give them? There was Jasmine, a senior whose mom had cancer. She'd missed a lot of school for medical appointments and family obligations, but she always made up the work without complaining. Her test scores were inconsistent, sometimes great, sometimes struggling, depending on how much sleep she'd gotten or how worried she was about her mom. There was Diego, who'd moved here from El Salvador 2 years ago. His English was improving rapidly, but standardized tests didn't account for the fact that he was basically learning 2 subjects at once, history and the language it was taught in. His essays showed real understanding of complex concepts, but multiple choice questions tripped him up when the vocabulary was unfamiliar. There was Ashley, whose dad was deployed overseas for the 3rd time. She carried herself with military precision, but I'd caught her crying in the hallway after getting back a disappointing quiz score. She'd been accepted to several colleges, but needed certain grades to keep her scholarship eligibility. Looking at students like these, I started to understand how teachers could rationalize grade changes. When you see kids working harder than their peers but struggling due to circumstances beyond their control, the temptation to level the playing field becomes overwhelming. Every test score starts to feel like a judgment not just on academic performance, but on worthiness, potential, and future opportunities. But I also started to see the slippery slope I was on. If I changed grades for students I personally liked or felt sorry for, what did that say about fairness? What about the students I didn't know as well, who might be dealing with invisible struggles? What about the kids who were naturally gifted but lazy? Did they deserve their easy A's while hardworking students like Marcus failed by 3 points? The questions kept me up at night. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, going over scenarios in my head. What if someone discovered what I'd done for Marcus? What if he found out? What if other students learned that grades could be negotiated or adjusted based on teacher sympathy rather than actual performance? In September, I attended a professional development workshop on academic integrity. The presenter, Dr. Martinez from the State Education Department, talked about the importance of maintaining consistent standards and the dangers of grade inflation. She showed statistics about how subjective grading had contributed to widening achievement gaps, teachers unconsciously giving higher grades to students they perceived as deserving while being harsher with others. Every time we adjust a grade based on factors other than academic performance, she said, we undermine the entire system. Grades become meaningless if they reflect sympathy rather than learning. I wanted to raise my hand and argue with her. What about students who performed below their potential due to circumstances they couldn't control? What about tests that didn't accurately measure understanding? What about the difference between learning and test-taking skills? But I stayed quiet because I knew she was right too. If every teacher started making individual judgment calls about who deserved better grades, the whole system would collapse. There had to be objective standards, even if they seemed unfair in specific cases. After the workshop, I drove home thinking about Marcus. He'd been at State University for a month now. According to his mom's Facebook posts, he was thriving. Good grades in his first college classes, involved in student government, volunteering with a literacy program for local elementary students. The scholarship kid who was making the most of his opportunities. But what if he wasn't really qualified to be there? What if I'd sent him to a university where he'd struggle and fail because he hadn't actually mastered the prerequisite knowledge? What if my grade change had set him up for future disappointment? These doubts plagued me throughout the fall semester. I found myself second-guessing every grading decision, being overly harsh on some assignments and overly generous on others, trying to balance out what I'd done for Marcus with extra rigidity elsewhere. My students probably thought I was losing my mind. One day I'd accept late work without penalty, the next I'd stick to deadlines like a drill sergeant. Some evenings I'd be talkative and affectionate, other times I'd be distant and irritable. She started asking more direct questions about what was bothering me. Are you having second thoughts about us? She asked one night in October. We just finished dinner at our favorite restaurant, but I'd barely touched my food. You seem like you're somewhere else all the time. It's not about us, I said. Work stuff, nothing I can really talk about. Try me. I deal with confidential situations all the time at the hospital. I know how to keep things private. For a moment, I considered telling her everything. Sarah was one of the most ethically grounded people I knew. She dealt with situations where following protocols might not seem like the most compassionate choice. Families who couldn't afford treatment, insurance companies denying coverage for necessary procedures, hospital administrators more concerned with liability than patient care. If anyone could understand the complexity of what I'd done, it would be her, but I couldn't risk it. If this ever came out, I needed her to be able to honestly say she had no knowledge of what I'd done. I couldn't make her an accessory to my choices. Just bureaucratic nonsense, I said. Testing requirements, grading policies, state mandates, nothing life-threatening like what you deal with. She didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. In November, Marcus came home for Thanksgiving break. I saw him at the grocery store, helping his mom with shopping for the family dinner. He looked older, more confident. College was clearly agreeing with him. him. Mr. Davis. He abandoned the shopping cart and came over to shake my hand. How are you? How's the new school year? Good, good. How's state treating you? It's amazing. Hard work, but I love it. My constitutional law professor says I have real potential. She's encouraging me to consider her graduate program after I finish my undergrad. Graduate school, law school applications, a career in constitutional law. The trajectory that had started with 3 points on a high school exam was expanding into possibilities I'd never imagined for him. That's wonderful, Marcus. You always had the mind for complex analysis. I've been thinking about that a lot, actually. About how you used to push us to look beyond the obvious answers, to consider multiple perspectives on historical events. That's exactly what law school is like, taking one situation and examining it from every possible angle. As he talked, I felt both pride and panic. Pride because he was clearly thriving and using skills he'd learned in my class. Panic because the foundation of his success was built on my deception. After he rejoined his mom and continued shopping, I stood in the produce section trying to calm my racing heart. This was what I'd wanted for him: success, opportunity, a chance to reach his potential. But the guilt was becoming unbearable. I started researching confession scenarios. What would happen if I came forward now, a year and a half after the fact? Would they retroactively change Marcus's high school grade? Would State University revoke his admission? Would his scholarship be canceled? The possibilities were terrifying. Even if criminal charges weren't filed, the revelation could destroy everything Marcus had built. His college career, his law school prospects, his family's pride, all of it could disappear because of my decision to help him. But keeping the secret was destroying me. I'd lost 15 pounds since the beginning of the school year. I was sleeping terribly, snapping at students over minor issues, avoiding social situations where I might be tempted to confide in someone. Sarah had started suggesting I see a counselor for stress management. In December, Principal Williams announced his retirement. After 12 years leading Jefferson High, he was stepping down to spend more time with his grandchildren. The news hit me like a physical blow. Williams was the only administrator who'd been here when I changed Marcus's grade. If the new principal decided to conduct a comprehensive review of academic records, or if someone else discovered the discrepancy, Williams wouldn't be around to provide context or protection. Not that he would protect me anyway. Williams was scrupulously honest, the kind of administrator who followed every rule and expected his staff to do the same. If he'd known what I'd done, he would have reported me immediately, regardless of his personal feelings about Marcus or my motivations. The retirement announcement triggered a new wave of anxiety. I started having panic attacks in the middle of teaching, sudden shortness of breath, racing heart, feeling like I was about to pass out in front of my students. I managed to hide most of them, but a few times I had to excuse myself and run to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face and try to regain composure. During winter break, Sarah suggested we take a long weekend trip to the mountains, get away from work, stress, do some hiking, maybe go skiing if the conditions were good. It sounded perfect, a chance to clear my head and reconnect with her without the daily reminders of what I'd done. But even in the mountains, surrounded by snow and pine trees and the kind of natural beauty that usually gave me perspective on life's problems, I couldn't escape the guilt. We'd be sitting by the fireplace in our cabin, and I'd find myself staring into the flames thinking about Marcus, about academic integrity, about the difference between helping a deserving student and committing fraud. "You're doing it again," Sarah said on our last evening. We'd just finished dinner at a local restaurant, and I'd been picking at my dessert while lost in thought. "Doing what?" "Disappearing into your head. You've been somewhere else this entire trip." I looked at her across the table, beautiful, patient, concerned about me even though I'd been distant and distracted for months. She deserved better than a boyfriend who was consumed by a secret he couldn't share. "I'm sorry. I know I haven't been good company lately. I'm not looking for good company. I'm looking for honesty. Whatever's going on with you, we can work through it together. But I can't help if you won't tell me what's wrong." The temptation to confess everything was overwhelming, to finally share the burden I'd been carrying alone for over a year, to let her help me figure out what to do next. But I couldn't do that to her, or to myself, or to Marcus. "It's nothing we can solve together," I said. "It's something I have to work through on my own." The hurt in her eyes was worse than any panic attack I'd experienced. When we got back from the mountains, things between Sarah and me were strained. We still saw each other regularly, but there was a new distance between us. She'd stopped asking direct questions about what was bothering me, which somehow made me feel worse than when she'd been pushing for answers. The spring semester started with news that our new principal would be Dr. Rebecca Chen, currently an assistant superintendent in the neighboring district. She was known for being thorough, detail-oriented, and committed to data-driven decision-making. The kind of administrator who might very well conduct comprehensive reviews of academic records to establish baseline metrics for the school. I spent January and February in a constant state of low-level terror, jumping every time my phone buzzed with an email from the administration, rehearsing explanations for why I might have adjusted Marcus's grade. I had legitimate reasons prepared: calculation error, late assignment I'd forgotten to record, extra credit project he'd completed. But would any of those explanations hold up under scrutiny? In March, Marcus came home for spring break. This time I encountered him at the coffee shop downtown, studying for midterm exams with a stack of legal textbooks that looked like they weighed 40 pounds pounds. Mr. Davis, perfect timing. He gestured to an empty chair at his table. I'm working on a paper about educational equity, and I keep thinking about discussions we used to have in your class. I sat down reluctantly. The last thing I wanted to do was discuss educational equity with the student whose grades I'd manipulated. What's the focus of your paper? The role of standardized testing in perpetuating socioeconomic inequality. How students from disadvantaged backgrounds can understand material just as well as their wealthier peers, but perform worse on tests due to factors like test anxiety, unfamiliarity with question formats, limited access to test preparation resources. He was writing about exactly the situation that had led me to change his grade. It's fascinating research, he continued. There are studies showing that teacher assessments of student understanding are often more accurate predictors of future academic success than standardized test scores. Makes you wonder how many deserving students have been held back by arbitrary cutoff points. I managed to nod and make appropriate responses, but inside I was screaming. Here was Marcus, unknowingly making the case for exactly what I'd done for him. But he was making it from the perspective of someone who'd succeeded legitimately, not someone who'd benefited from teacher intervention. Your paper sounds very compelling, I said when I could trust my voice to remain steady. I'm hoping to get it published in the undergraduate research journal. My professor thinks it could be adapted for a real policy publication eventually. A published paper about educational inequity, written by a student whose own success was based on grade manipulation. The irony was suffocating. After he returned to his studying, I walked home thinking about how completely I'd trapped myself. If I confessed now, I wouldn't just be destroying Marcus's current success. I'd be undermining some work he was doing that might actually help other students in similar situations. His research, his advocacy, his future legal career focused on educational equity, EDS, all of it would be tainted by the revelation that his own academic career was built on a lie. But continuing to stay silent felt equally impossible. Every interaction with Marcus, every update about his success, every expression of gratitude from his family, it all felt like evidence of my deception piling up higher and higher. Dr. Chen officially started as principal in April. Her first all-staff meeting was focused on academic excellence and institutional integrity. She talked about the importance of consistent standards, transparent processes, and data-driven decision-making. She announced plans to review grading policies, update the student information system, and conduct comprehensive audits of academic records to establish baseline metrics for measuring school improvement. I sat in the back of the meeting room, palms sweating, trying to look engaged while internally calculating how long I had before the audit discovered my grade change. Weeks? Months? Days? After the meeting, I drove home and opened a bottle of wine. Then I sat at my kitchen table and wrote out a full confession, every detail of what I'd done and why. The phone call from Marcus's mom, the realization that I'd read the wrong score, the moment I'd changed his grade in the system. I wrote about his circumstances, his work ethic, his character. I wrote about the year and a half of guilt and sleepless nights that had followed. When I finished, the confession was 4 pages long. I folded it, put it in an envelope, and wrote, Dr. Rebecca Chen, Principal, on the outside. Then I put the envelope in my desk drawer and tried to decide if I had the courage to deliver it. That night, Sarah came over for dinner. We'd been trying to rebuild the closeness we'd lost during my months of secretiveness, but things still felt fragile between us. She brought takeout from the Thai place we both loved, and we ate while watching a comedy special that should have been funny but somehow felt hollow. I've been thinking about us, she said during a pause between episodes. My heart stopped. What about us? About whatever's been going on with you these past few months. The distance, the stress, the way you disappear into your head even when we're together. I waited for her to continue, afraid of what she might say next. I love you, she said, but I can't keep dating someone who won't let me in. If there's something you can't or won't share with me, that's your choice. But I need to know if this is how things are going to be from now on. The ultimatum I'd been dreading, tell her the truth or lose her. I said, it's that I can't. The situation is complicated and involving you would only make things worse for everyone, including me, especially you. She was quiet for a long time, picking at her pad thai while I tried to read her expression. Is it illegal? She finally asked. The question hit me like a physical blow. Sarah wasn't naive. She'd put together enough pieces to understand that my secret was more serious than typical work stress. I can't answer that. That's an answer in itself. We finished dinner in silence. When she left that night, she kissed me goodbye like she might not see me again for a while. I need some time to think, she said, about what I can and can't accept in a relationship. After she left, I pulled the confession letter back out of my desk drawer, reread it 3 times, added a paragraph about how the guilt had affected my personal relationships and my ability to function as a teacher, how keeping the secret had been almost as damaging as the original act, but I still couldn't bring myself to deliver it. The audit began in early May. Dr. Chen announced that they'd be reviewing academic records from the past 3 years, looking for patterns in grading, attendance, and student performance. The review was being conducted by an external consulting firm that specialized in educational data analysis. I had maybe 2 weeks before they got to my records. 2 weeks to decide whether to confess voluntarily or wait to be discovered. Marcus was finishing his freshman year with a 3.7 gigapascals. His mom posted pictures on social media of him receiving an award for community service and academic excellence. He'd been elected to student government for the following year and had been accepted to a prestigious summer internship with a civil rights law firm. Everything he'd achieved was real. His college grades, his leadership positions, his internship. Those were based on his actual abilities and hard work, but the opportunity to achieve them had come from my grade grade change. Without that falsified test score, he never would have graduated high school with the GPA needed for his scholarship. On a Thursday afternoon, I was grading essays in my classroom when my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Davis? This is Marcus. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. My hands started shaking. Of course. How are things at State? Really good. Finals week is crazy, but I'm managing. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I wanted to update you on that research paper I mentioned, the one about educational equity and standardized testing. Sure. My professors submitted it to a national conference, and they accepted it. I'm going to present my research at the Educational Policy Association meeting this summer, and there's interest from a major education journal about publishing a revised version. I closed my eyes. That's incredible. Marcus, congratulations. I keep thinking about how this all started in your class. The way you taught us to question assumptions, to look at issues from multiple angles. You always said that the most important skill we could learn was critical thinking, and that's exactly what this research required. You did the work, Marcus. You developed those skills through your own effort. Maybe. But you created the environment where that was possible. You believed in students like me when other people might have written us off. If he only knew how much I'd believed in him, how far I'd gone to ensure his success. After we hung up, I sat in my empty classroom staring at the stacks of essays I still needed to grade. Papers from current students who were working just as hard as Marcus had, facing their own challenges and obstacles. What made him different from them? Why had I been willing to bend the rules for him but not for others? The honest answer was that I'd liked him more. He'd been more engaged in class, more appreciative of help, more respectful and positive than many of his peers. But was that really a valid reason to manipulate his grades? What about the quieter students who worked just as hard but didn't have Marcus's natural charisma? What about the kids who struggled with social anxiety or depression, who couldn't project the same enthusiasm even when they cared just as much? I'd told myself I was helping a deserving student, but really I'd been playing favorites, making subjective judgments about who merited extra help based on my personal preferences rather than objective criteria. That realization made me feel even worse about what I'd done. The following Monday, Dr. Chen called a faculty meeting to discuss the audit findings so far. They'd completed their review of attendance records and were moving on to academic performance data. She mentioned that they'd found some interesting patterns that warranted further investigation, but didn't elaborate on what those might be. I spent that entire week convinced that every phone call, every email, every interaction with administrators was the moment my secret would be revealed. But the week passed without incident, and the next week, and the next. By the end of May, the audit was complete. Dr. Chen announced the results at our final faculty meeting of the year. Overall, the data showed strong academic performance with consistent grading standards across departments. A few minor discrepancies had been identified, mostly calculation errors or missing assignments that hadn't been properly recorded, but nothing that suggested systematic problems. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt like I'd somehow cheated death without deserving to survive. Marcus graduated from high school 2 years ago. He's now finishing his sophomore year at State University, still thriving academically and personally, still planning to attend law school and pursue a career focused on educational equity and civil rights, still completely unaware that his success is partially built on a lie I told. Sarah and I broke up 6 months after the audit. She said she couldn't be with someone who kept major secrets from her, and I couldn't argue with that reasoning. She deserved a partner who could be fully honest with her, and I couldn't be that person as long as I was carrying this burden. I miss her every day. But I also know that losing her was a natural consequence of the choice I made to change Marcus's grade. Actions have ripple effects that extend far beyond their original scope. I'm still teaching at Jefferson High, still trying to be the best educator I can be while living with the knowledge that I compromised my integrity for one student. Some days I feel like a fraud standing in front of my classes. Other days I feel like someone who made a difficult choice in an imperfect system. I've never changed another grade. Haven't even been tempted to, despite having students who face similar challenges to what Marcus dealt with. Maybe that's growth, or maybe it's cowardice. I'm not sure I know the difference anymore. What I do know is that secrets have power. Isolate you from people you care about, make you question every decision, turn moments of joy into reminders of guilt. The secret I've been carrying has cost me my relationship, my peace of mind, and my sense of who I am as a person. But it's also given Marcus opportunities he might never have had otherwise. A college education, leadership experiences, research accomplishments, a clear path toward a career where he can help other students facing similar obstacles. Tangible good has come from my deception, even if the means were ethically questionable. I still don't know if what I did was right or wrong. Maybe that's not the kind of question that has a clear answer. Maybe ethical choices aren't always about following rules versus breaking them. Maybe sometimes they're about weighing competing values, fairness versus compassion, integrity versus justice, individual consequences versus systemic problems. What I do know is that I can't undo what I did. Marcus will graduate from State University next year with a degree he earned through his own hard work and intelligence, built on a foundation that includes my grade change. He'll go to law school and become the kind of lawyer who fights for educational equity and civil rights. He'll help other students who face the same obstacles he did, students who deserve better than what an imperfect system typically provides them. And I'll continue teaching, trying to help students reach their potential through legitimate means, carrying the weight of what I did and the knowledge that sometimes good outcomes can emerge from ethically ambiguous choices. Last week, I got a text from Marcus. He'd been accepted to 3 law schools, including his top choice. The message included a photo of him holding the acceptance letter, grinning from ear to ear. "Couldn't have done it without teachers like you who believed in me," he wrote. I stared at that text for a long time before deleting it. Then I went back to grading papers from my current students, each one a reminder that every choice I make as a teacher has consequences that extend far beyond my classroom. The secret that could ruin my entire life has already changed it in ways I never anticipated. It's cost me a relationship I treasured and forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about my own motivations and biases. But it's also contributed to a young man's success and may ultimately help him improve educational opportunities for other deserving students. I live with that contradiction every day. Some secrets destroy lives, others reshape them in ways that are too complex to label as simply good or bad. As I sit here writing this, Marcus is 3 weeks away from finishing his sophomore year. In 2 years, he'll graduate with a bachelor's degree. 3 years after that, he'll finish law school. 5 years from now, he'll be practicing law, advocating for educational equity, fighting for students who need someone to believe in them. The grade change that started this whole chain of events took 30 seconds to complete. The consequences have lasted 3 years and will continue for the rest of both our lives. That's the thing about secrets. They never stay contained to the moment you create them. They expand and evolve and affect everything that comes after in ways you never could have predicted. Mine destroyed my relationship with Sarah, but it also helped launch Marcus's career as an advocate for educational justice. It compromised my professional integrity, but it also prevented a deserving student from being held back by an arbitrary test score. It isolated me from people I cared about, but it also taught me things about myself and the education system that I needed to learn. I can't go back and undo what I did. I can only live with the choices I made and try to make better ones going forward. Maybe that's all any of us can do, make the best decisions we can with the information and values we have at the time, then deal with the consequences as they unfold. The secret is still there, still has the power to ruin my career if it's ever discovered, but it's also become part of who I am now. Someone who learned that integrity and compassion don't always align neatly, that good intentions can lead to ethically complicated situations, and that the impact of our choices often extends far beyond what we initially imagine. 3 years later, I'm still the teacher who changed a student's grade. I'm also still the person who has to live with that decision every day, weighing its costs against its benefits, trying to figure out what it means about who I am and who I want to be. That's the secret that could ruin my entire life. It hasn't ruined it yet, but it's definitely changed it in ways I'm still discovering. And Marcus? He's thriving at State University, completely unaware that his success story includes a chapter about teacher fraud and academic manipulation. Sometimes I wonder what he'd think if he knew the truth. Would he be grateful for the intervention that gave him opportunities he might not have had otherwise? Or would he feel that his achievements had been tainted by deception? I hope I never have to find out. Some secrets are meant to be carried alone, no matter how heavy they become. This is mine to bear, and I've accepted that responsibility, along with all its complications. The bell rings, signaling the end of another school day. Students pack up their belongings and file out of my classroom, heading home to families and friends and lives that don't involve secrets about grade changes and academic fraud. I envy them that simplicity, even as I appreciate the complexity that my choice has brought to my understanding of education, ethics, and human nature. Tomorrow I'll teach another day of classes, help another group of students work toward their goals, make decisions about grades and assignments that I hope are based on clear criteria rather than personal preferences. I'll try to be the kind of teacher Marcus deserved, one who supports students through legitimate means rather than secret interventions. But I'll also remember what I learned from changing his grade, that sometimes the line between helping and cheating isn't as clear as we'd like it to be, and that good people can make ethically questionable choices for compassionate reasons, and that the consequences of our actions often extend far beyond what we initially anticipate. That knowledge comes with a cost, the burden of carrying a secret that could destroy my career, the loss of a relationship I treasured, the ongoing question of whether I made the right choice or simply convinced myself that a wrong choice was justified. But it also comes with insight about the education system, about myself, and about the complex relationship between rules and justice. Marcus is succeeding in college not just because I changed his test score, but because he's genuinely intelligent, hardworking, and committed to making a difference. My intervention gave him an opportunity. What he's done with that opportunity is entirely his own achievement. 3 years later, that distinction still matters to me. It's what allows me to sleep at night most of the time. It's what helps me believe that despite the ethical complexity of what I did, some good has come from it. The secret remains. Heavy, complicated, potentially destructive, but also transformative in ways I never could have predicted when I made that 30-second decision to change 3 points on a standardized test. Some secrets ruin lives. Others just change them in ways that are too nuanced to judge as simply good or bad. Mine has done both. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in October. 3 years, 5 months, and 12 days after I changed Marcus's grade. Dr. Chen sat across from me in the conference room, flanked by the district's legal counsel and HR director. The evidence was laid out on the table between us. Timestamps showing when Marcus's score had been modified, audit trails from the student information system, documentation that no calculation error or late assignment could account for the change. They'd found it during a routine system upgrade. The new software had flagged historical data discrepancies, and mine was among dozens that had been investigated. Most were legitimate, teachers correcting actual mistakes or recording previously missing assignments. But 3 couldn't be explained through normal academic processes. I was the only one who'd chosen to confess rather than fabricate a justification. Mr. Davis, Dr. Chen said, "You've acknowledged changing Mr. Johnson's test score from 67% to 70% in May 3 years ago. Can you explain your reasoning? I'd rehearsed this moment hundreds of times, but sitting there with my career hanging in the balance, the words felt inadequate. Marcus was a hardworking student who'd overcome significant personal challenges. I believed he deserved to pass, and seeing him fail by 3 points felt unjust. Regardless of your personal feelings about fairness, the legal counsel interjected, you understand that falsifying academic records is a serious violation of district policy and potentially criminal fraud? I understand that now more clearly than I did then. The hearing lasted 2 hours. They asked about other students. Had I changed anyone else's grades? They reviewed my entire employment record, looking for patterns of misconduct. They questioned my judgment, my character, my fitness to remain in the classroom. Through it all, I kept thinking about Marcus. He was a junior at State University now, president of the Pre-Law Society, interning with a federal judge, applying to top-tier law schools. His research on educational equity had been published in 2 academic journals. He was exactly the kind of student who justified the university's decision to offer him a scholarship, exactly the kind of person who would make a difference in the legal profession. None of that mattered to the disciplinary panel. They weren't concerned with outcomes, only with policies and procedures I'd violated. The decision came 2 weeks later. Termination, effective immediately. Loss of teaching license, though I could reapply after 5 years with documented evidence of rehabilitation. No criminal charges would be filed, given my cooperation and lack of financial benefit from the grade change. I cleaned out my classroom on a Saturday morning when the building was empty. 15 years of lesson plans, student projects, educational posters, personal mementos, op-essa, it all fit into 6 cardboard boxes. The janitor, Carl, helped me carry them to my car. Sorry to see you go, Mr. Davis, he said. Students always seem to like your classes. I thanked him and drove home, wondering what I'd tell people who asked why I was no longer teaching. The truth would destroy Marcus's achievements along with my own reputation, but lying felt like adding another layer of deception to an already complicated situation. Marcus called that evening. Word had somehow reached him about my departure from Jefferson High. Mr. Davis, I heard you're leaving teaching. Is everything okay? His voice was concerned, caring. The student who'd grown into a thoughtful young man, checking on his former teacher during what he assumed was a difficult transition. I'm fine, Marcus. Just time for a change of career. That's surprising. You always seem so passionate about education. Are you sure you're okay? For a moment, I considered telling him everything. The grade change, the years of guilt, the investigation that had finally caught up with me. He deserved to know that his success was partially built on my deception, but he also deserved to continue his education without the burden of that knowledge. Sometimes, life takes unexpected turns, I said. I hope you keep working hard at State. You're going to make an excellent lawyer. After we hung up, I sat in my empty apartment. Sarah and I had broken up 2 years ago, and I'd moved into a smaller place, thinking about the full circle of consequences my decision had created. I'd tried to help Marcus by changing his grade. That choice had cost me my relationship, my peace of mind, and ultimately my career. But it had also contributed to launching him toward a future where he might help other students facing similar challenges. The math of it all was impossible to calculate. Was my career worth his opportunities? Would he have succeeded anyway if I'd let him fail that test? Could the good he might do in the legal profession justify the deception that helped get him there? I'd never know the answers to those questions. All I could do was live with the consequences of the choice I'd made in a moment of compassion and questionable judgment. 6 months later, I was working as a tutor for a private educational company, helping students prepare for standardized tests. Oddly enough, the pay was decent, the hours flexible, and I could still do what I'd always loved, help young people learn and grow. But I missed the classroom, missed being part of a school community, missed the daily interaction with students who were discovering ideas for the first time. Marcus graduated from State University that spring, summa cum laude. His mom sent me a photo from the ceremony. Marcus, in his cap and gown, holding his diploma, surrounded by family. He'd been accepted to Harvard Law School with a full scholarship. His undergraduate thesis on educational policy had won multiple awards and was being considered for publication as a book. Everything he'd achieved was legitimate, based on his intelligence, work ethic, and character. My grade change had simply provided the initial opportunity. What he'd done with that opportunity was entirely his own accomplishment. But I still wondered what would have happened if I'd let him fail that test. Would he have retaken the class? Gone to community college instead of State? Found a different path that led to equally meaningful success? Or would that 3-point difference have derailed his educational trajectory entirely? The questions haunted me, but they also reminded me why I'd made the choice I did. In a moment when a student's future hung in the balance, I'd chosen to prioritize what seemed just over what was procedurally correct. The consequences had been more far-reaching than I'd anticipated, affecting not just Marcus's life, but my own and the people around me. 3 years after losing my teaching position, I received a letter from Marcus. He'd finished his first year at Harvard Law School, clerked for a federal appeals court judge over the summer, and was planning to specialize in education law and civil rights litigation. Dear Mr. Davis, the letter began, I wanted to update update you on my progress and thank you again for the foundation you provided during my high school years. The critical thinking skills I learned in your class have been invaluable in law school, and I often find myself drawing on discussions we had about justice, fairness, and the complexity of social systems. He went on to describe his work with a legal aid clinic that helps students navigate academic disciplinary procedures and his research on standardized testing and educational equity. He was becoming exactly the kind of lawyer I'd hoped he would, someone who fought for students who didn't have advocates, someone who understood the systems that could hold back deserving young people. I hope you're well, the letter concluded, and that you know how much impact you had on my life and the lives of so many students. You taught us that education is about more than grades and test scores. It's about developing the tools to think critically about the world and work toward making it more just. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer where I kept other mementos from my teaching career. Then I sat at my kitchen table and wondered if Marcus would still feel that way if he knew the truth about how his educational journey had really begun. The secret I'd carried for 6 years had cost me my career, my relationship, and countless sleepless nights. But it had also contributed to the development of a young lawyer who was dedicated to fighting educational inequity and helping other students facing similar challenges. I still couldn't decide if the trade-off had been worth it. Maybe that's not a question that has a clear answer. Maybe some choices are too complex to be judged as simply right or wrong, especially when their consequences unfold over years rather than moments. What I did know was that I'd learned something important about the relationship between rules and justice, about the unintended consequences of compassionate choices, and about the weight of secrets that are meant to protect others rather than ourselves. Marcus went on to graduate from Harvard Law School, clerk for a Supreme Court justice, and establish a nonprofit organization focused on educational equity and reform. He argued several cases before federal appeals courts, published extensively on standardized testing and academic fairness, and became a nationally recognized expert on education law. None of that would have happened, or at least it wouldn't have happened the same way, without the 3 points I'd added to his test score in May of his senior year of high school. That knowledge became both my burden and my redemption. I'd compromised my professional integrity, lost my career, and carried a secret that isolated me from people I cared about. But I'd also played a small part in launching someone who went on to help countless other students facing similar obstacles. The mathematics of moral choices, I'd learned, are rarely simple. Sometimes doing the wrong thing leads to outcomes that justify the initial transgression. Sometimes protecting one person requires deceiving others. Sometimes the rules that exist to ensure fairness can themselves become barriers to justice. I never told Marcus what I'd done for him. He built his success on his own intelligence, determination, and character. My intervention had simply provided an opportunity. What he did with that opportunity was entirely his own achievement. He deserved to feel proud of his accomplishments without having them complicated by knowledge of the deception that had helped make them possible. The secret remained mine to carry, along with all its complexity and contradiction. Some secrets destroy lives, others reshape them in ways that are too nuanced to be judged as simply destructive or beneficial. Mine had done both, and I'd learned to live with that ambiguity. 15 years later, Marcus Johnson was sworn in as a federal judge, the youngest person ever appointed to his district court. The ceremony was covered by national news, highlighting his work on educational equity and his rise from a small-town high school to the federal bench. I watched the coverage from my apartment, now gray-haired and working as an educational consultant, still helping students but never again in a traditional classroom setting. As Marcus took his oath of office, surrounded by family and colleagues, I thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A phone call from a worried mother, a test score 3 points too low, a 30-second decision to change a grade in a computer system, 15 years of consequences, rippling outward in ways I never could have anticipated. The secret that could have ruined my life had instead transformed it, teaching me lessons about justice, integrity, and the complex relationship between rules and compassion that I never would have learned otherwise. I'd paid a price for what I'd done, my career, my relationship, years of guilt and anxiety. But I'd also contributed, in a small way, to the elevation of someone who was now in a position to help thousands of other students facing similar challenges. Judge Johnson's first major ruling was in a case involving standardized testing and educational equity. He sided with students who argued that relying solely on test scores for graduation decisions violated their constitutional rights to equal educational opportunity. Reading about that decision, I finally felt something I hadn't experienced in 15 years: peace with what I'd done. The secret was still there, still had the power to complicate Marcus's legacy if it ever came to light, but it had also become part of a larger story about second chances, about the difference between following rules and pursuing justice, about the unintended consequences of choices made in moments of moral complexity. I'd changed a student's grade to help him succeed. That decision had cost me my career and reshaped my understanding of ethics, integrity, and the education system. It had also contributed to the development of a federal judge who was dedicated to ensuring that other students wouldn't face the same arbitrary barriers that had once threatened to derail Marcus's future. The secret that could ruin my entire life had become the foundation for someone else's remarkable success. Whether that trade-off was worth it remained an open question, but it was one I'd finally made peace with. Some secrets destroy, others create. The most powerful ones do both, leaving us to live with the complexity of unintended consequences and moral ambiguity. This was mine, heavy, transformative, and ultimately more meaningful than I'd ever imagined when I first first made that 30-second choice to change 3 points on a test score. The story ends where it began, with a secret that had the power to ruin everything, but instead became the catalyst for a lifetime of learning about justice, compassion, and the unpredictable ways our choices shape the world around us. Marcus never learned what I'd done for him. He built his success on legitimate achievements, reached the federal bench through his own merit, and used his position to help other students facing educational challenges. My secret remained mine to carry, but it had become something more than a burden. It had become proof that sometimes the wrong choice can lead to the right outcomes, and that the full consequences of our actions often take decades to unfold. The mathematics of morality, I'd finally understood, are too complex for simple calculations. Sometimes all we can do is make the best choice we can with the information we have, then live with whatever consequences emerge from that decision. I'd made my choice. Marcus had made his. And somehow, in the intersection of those choices, something good had emerged from something ethically questionable. That was the secret that could have ruined my entire life. Instead, it taught me that life is more complicated than I'd ever imagined, and that sometimes the most important lessons come from the choices we're least proud of making.